In this video, we're going to cover an introduction to firewalls. What exactly are firewalls? How do they work? What do they look at to be able to allow or deny traffic to go through? And then go through some examples to see what some firewall rules look like. So the very first question is, well, what is a firewall? Well, a firewall actually comes from the old idea of a wall, specifically, that blocks fire. What would happen is actually in construction today, you will see walls that are made of materials that don't burn, such as brick. And what the idea is that if you have a fire on one side of that wall, the fire cannot go through the non-burnable material, such as the brick, and get to the other side of the wall. Firewall. You can't get much simpler than that. So the same idea happens in computer security, is we want to set up a firewall or some way to be able to block malicious traffic from accessing the secure side of our environment. So firewalls are based off of what's called the 5 tuples. The 5 tuples basically look at traffic to be able to determine whether it should be allowed or denied into the environment. It looks at the source IP and source port of traffic. So when it looks at traffic, it sees where are you coming from. It then looks at the destination IP and destination port. Where are you going? And then also the protocol, or how are you getting there. So for example, if we wanted to allow PC0 to access server 0, PC0, let's say its IP address is 192.168.42.10, and let's say he's the client, so its source port should be all or any. The destination IP is going to be server 0, so let's say that is 172.16.14.10, and then destination port, let's say we're wanting port 80. And then the protocol in this case would be TCP. TCP port 80 is what's generally used for HTTP or web browsing. So you see, by coming up with these 5 tuples, we can then look at any flow of traffic that's going on in our environment to be able to determine whether we should allow or whether we should deny. The biggest concern we have here is, well, one, there's a lot of things to look at as far as the source, destination, protocols, and so on. The second is the flow or the direction of traffic. In this example, since I'm going from PC0 to server 0, it's the destination port that I'm concerned with. When it goes back, then I'm looking at the source port. If PC0 is talking to server 0 on port 80, server 0 then returns back its communication again on port 80. And that's the flow that we have to watch for. If that's confusing, don't worry, we're nowhere near ready to continue talking about that. But that can continue to get confusing, especially when we start adding in some additional items, such as, do we want to permit or deny that traffic? In the example we just gave of PC0 to server 0, we wanted to permit or allow that traffic. And then we have to choose what type of interface do we want that on? Which interface on that router do we want to apply that rule? Which direction is the traffic going, in or out of the firewall or router? And then lastly, do we want to give it a name so we can then organize them? All of this information can get fairly confusing, and so a great way to be able to organize that is to put it into a table format. What we can do is we can go ahead and list out the source IP, source ports, destinations, and so on into a nice table in order to help organize our thoughts prior to moving forward. When we're done, we have something similar to this. We have a firewall rule table, or what's called an access list, or ACL table. And we can start seeing, well, perhaps we have here an entire network, a /24 network is being allowed. Source port star, it's my way of saying any or all. Destination, here again, another /24 or entire network with the destination of port 80. Same thing here. We have an example of 1433, which is a Microsoft SQL port. We're allowing one specific IP to another specific IP with one specific source and destination port. And then another example right here, ICMP. ICMP does not use ports. And so sometimes the rules or the tuples that we use get changed a little bit. Since there is no source and destination port with ICMP, then suddenly instead of 5 tuples, we have 3. We have a source IP and a destination IP and protocol only. So these things can change, all depending on the protocol that we're using. Again, if this is confusing, don't worry, we're not there yet. So that's the 5 tuple rules. Prior to the 5 tuples being fully implemented in a lot of network devices, they used what's called a standard access list. Basically, when firewalls were first invented, they did not have a whole lot of power behind them. They were fairly slow, and therefore the rules had to be very, very simplified. Cisco's example of that is what's called a standard access list, and that's what we're going to start by looking at. The standard access list or simplified access lists aren't as granular as the 5 tuples. We can't be as specific of saying this IP can contact this port, but that IP can contact this other port. We're not quite as specific with that. The great thing is it makes it a whole lot easier though. As far as for who's talking to whom, really we just need the source IP. So we only really have to identify who is initiating the conversations. So when we look at our access list rules or our table, the table gets much more simplified. So in this case, what we would have is we'd just have our source IP. 192.168.12.0/24. And then do we want to allow or deny? Sure, let's permit. And then which interface? Well, maybe I want interface G0/0, direction outbound. And then what rule shall we call this? Protect servers. And that's the more simplified access list. So only have to worry about who is initiating the conversation. So let's look at an example. Here we have an example. It is a nice little packet tracer. We have 3 networks. We have desktops, management, and servers. And there are 3 requirements for our environment. The first requirement is we want to allow the management network to contact the server network. So management should be able to come up here and talk to servers. And second requirement is we want to allow the desktops to access the management network. So desktops to management. And then the last requirement is we want to block or deny the desktops from accessing these well, scratch that. We want to allow desktops to access management. I was getting ahead of myself. So we allow desktops to access management, and then we block desktops from accessing servers. So that should not go through. All right, so those are our flows, and we can then start analyzing these from the point of view of a standard access list. And in order to do that, we come up with a nice little spreadsheet. And it's just that simple. Do we want to permit or deny? Permit or deny our traffic? Do we want to allow, who are we allowing? Which interface, which direction, and then what do we want to call these rules? Well, let's look at our flows again one more time before we get too far in. We want to allow management to servers. Allow management. Try that with green. allow management to servers, allow desktops to management, and then deny desktops to servers. So let's look at this and start to see what type of or where our common interfaces are, or specifically which interfaces we need to put an access list on. So we have three interfaces here. We have G00 for the that's connected to the desktops, G01 which is connected to management, and then G02 which is connected to servers. Specifically, the only place we are denying traffic is from desktops to servers. So since we're only denying traffic between desktops and servers, we probably want to put a firewall rule or access list on either the G00, which is connected to the desktop environment, or G02, which is connected to the server environment. So that simplifies our makeup a little bit more. Now we just have to decide which one of those we want to put it on. Now, because we're only able to put a firewall rule based on the source of our traffic, we have to look at what our flows are. If we put our firewall rule here on G01 in order to block desktops, then that means we're going to block the source desktop network from being able to reach the servers. Actually, let's clear all that out. There we go. If we put our firewall rule right there that blocks desktops, then that means it's going to block the desktops from talking to the servers, which is good, but it's also going to block the desktops from talking to management, which our rules say that we shouldn't do. So we can't put our firewall on, or our firewall rule on interface G00, because that's going to block the entire desktop network from accessing it. Instead, if we put our block desktops network, or block desktops rule on G02, then what's going to happen is the desktops will be blocked from talking to the servers. However, desktops will still be able to talk to management because management is on a different interface. Management doesn't have to go through G02. Hopefully that makes sense. So what we'll do is let's look at our spreadsheet. First thing we want to do is we want to deny. What do we want to deny? We want to deny the desktops. So let's go ahead and put in the source, 192.168.42.0/24. Which interface do we want to put that on? Well, we were just saying the interface G02. Which direction do we want to put this on? Well, here comes the question about directions. From the router's point of view, from the network device's point of view, G02 is outbound traffic. The traffic is going from the router out to the network. Therefore, this rule will be outbound for its direction. If, however, we put this on G00, then the traffic would have been inbound from the router's point of view. Hopefully that makes sense. So, out. And then what do we want to call this? I was saying block desktops. Let's call it protect servers. Protect servers, secure servers, however you might want to call it. So that is our first rule. We are going to go ahead and deny the desktops from accessing the servers. One of the things we have to worry about with all of our firewall rules is that there is, at the very end of everything, what's called an explicit deny or an implicit deny. An implicit deny means that if you're not specifically allowing something, you are denying it. So where this comes in important is right here, we are denying our desktops, but we are never allowing our management networks. And so we deny desktops, but then it keeps going down the list here, and we eventually get to the end, and we're just denying everything altogether. So we need to actually add in additional rule right here that allows management. So let's check that out. So management is 192.168.242.0/24. The rule is still protect servers. The direction is still out. The interface is still G02. So I'm just going to copy these, paste them right in there. And at that point, we are denying our desktops. We are permitting our management network, and then we're just denying everything else. In this scenario, there is nothing else, so that's perfectly fine. However, if we now look at this, we have a deny specifically for the desktop environment. And then we have a deny for everything. Well, if I'm denying everything, then there's no need to have that first deny in there. So I could actually just simply scratch this guy out, leave only my allow for the management network, and I should end up with the same thing with only one written access list instead of two. Well, let's give that a shot. So I'm going to go ahead and delete my deny desktops. My implicit deny, I don't have to type in, so I'm going to delete that out of my list as well. And I end up with one access list for my entire environment. So let's configure the router. Let's see, I think I need to, yes, I have to set IP addresses. So IP address 192.168.42.1. Let's configure management. No shut to turn it on. And then lastly, G02, IP address 172.16.14.1, subnet mask 255.255.255.0. No shut. All right, before I do anything, I want to test to see if these guys can actually talk to each other. So right now, desktops can ping. What is this guy's? This guy doesn't have an address either. 192.168.42.10. Always have to set the default gateway. 168.42.1. Same thing for the server. 72.16.14.10. 255, 255, 255.0. 72.16.14.1 for the gateway. So right now, my desktop should be able to ping 172.16.14.10. First ping will almost always time out, so the second one should come in. There we go. So I was able to successfully ping from the desktops to the server network. Let's go ahead and create an access list that stops that from happening. Let's look at my list right here. So I've got the rule name of protect servers. So IP access list. Again, if you're ever concerned, just hit question mark. It tells you exactly what you need to type in. We're creating a standard access list. Here it's asking us for a name. So what shall we call this? think we called it protect servers. These are case sensitive, so pay attention to what you're typing there. So what we want to do, we want to create a rule that allows, not allow, permit. What source do we want? We want to allow the source of 192.168.20.242. 192.168.242.0. Here we have to do the wildcard bits, which is the opposite of the subnet mask. So 0.0.0.255. Again, question mark. It says the only thing left is the character turn or the enter key. So there we go. I've gone ahead, I've created my access list. Let's go back into interface G02. Right, G02. IP access group. Tab complete's helpful here because I don't really remember the difference between access list and access group. I know it starts with access. Hit tab, it automatically completes it for me. Protect servers. Again, this is where the spreadsheet comes in really handy. I've already written it out. I know exactly the case sensitivity and everything on G02, and I know its direction needs to be out. So IP access group protect servers outbound. All right, come back to my desktop. I hit up arrow to try the ping again, and it should destination host unreachable. And it should be that simple. I'm not going to go through the process of IPing the management system because I'm assuming it's going to work, and I don't want to waste your time on the video here. So it's just that simple. We got the 5 tuples, fairly complex, but we're starting off here with just the standard access list. And then if we go ahead and we look at the running configuration here, we can actually see here on the interface G02, we have our IP access group. Keep looking down and we will see our, where's our rules? There we go. IP access lists, standard protect servers, which is simply the permit rule. There is an implicit deny at the very end, so that will then that is what denied my desktop environment altogether.